The year is 2342.
Humanity, having clawed its way back from the brink of self-annihilation during the great collapse of the 22nd century, had finally reached for the stars with renewed purpose. The generation ships, great arcs carrying pioneers, were decades out, bound for the nearest potentially habitable systems. But closer to home, within the Sol system, exploration continued, pushing the boundaries of known space and known physics. The research vessel Stardust Drifter hung silently in the Kuiper Belt's desolate expanse, far beyond Neptune's languid orbit. Its mission, to deploy and monitor a new generation of deep space chronometric sensors, designed to detect faint gravitational wave echoes from the universe's dawn. Dr. Elias Vance, a man whose thinning gray hair and perpetually weary eyes belied a fierce intellect, watched the data streams flicker across his console. For weeks, the mission had been routine. Deploy sensor drone, calibrate, collect baseline data, repeat. The silence of deep space was profound, broken only by the hum of the life support and the quiet chatter of the ship's AI, designated Oracle. Dr. Vance, Oracle's calm, synthesized voice chimed through the small research lab. Sensor drone Kilo 7 is reporting anomalous chronoton particle readings.
Deviation Sigma 9.
Elias sat upright, weariness evaporating. Sigma 9 was statistically almost impossible. An error, surely.
Run diagnostics on Kilo 7, Oracle.
Check for sensor degradation or environmental interference. Diagnostics underway, Doctor. No hardware malfunctions detected. Environmental interference nominal, standard cosmic background radiation, solar wind negligible at this distance. A pause, then, the chronoton signature is, structured, Doctor. Repeating pattern detected. It does not match any known astrophysical phenomena. Elias leaned closer, his heart rate quickening. Structured chronoton particles? Time itself, behaving unnaturally? Put the pattern on the main screen, Oracle. And bring Kilo 7's telemetry online. Full spectrum analysis. The main screen flickered, displaying not a chaotic jumble of particle hits, but a complex, repeating waveform pulsing with an eerie, internal rhythm. It was beautiful, intricate, and utterly alien. Telemetry showed drone Kilo 7 was stable, its position unchanged relative to the Stardust Drifter, but the space around it seemed wrong. Light from distant stars appeared subtly warped near the drone's location, as if passing through flawed glass. Oracle, calculate the energy source required to generate such a localized chronoton field. Calculating. The energy levels are paradoxical, Doctor. According to current models, the source would require energy exceeding that of a Type II civilization, yet the field's spatial footprint is barely 10 meters across. Furthermore, the particle decay signature suggests temporal displacement.
Temporal displacement? Elias breathed the words.
Time travel, or something akin to it, wasn't theoretical anymore. Crude, short-hop temporal bubbles had been achieved in labs, but this was different. This was controlled, sustained, and potent. Is the source the drone itself?
Negative, Doctor.
The field originates from a point approximately 15 meters coreward from Kilo 7's position. There is no detectable object at that location in any conventional sensor spectrum, visual, infrared, gravimetric. Except for the chronotons, Elias finished. Something is there, existing partially or wholly outside of normal spacetime, but bleeding chronoton echoes into our dimension. He felt a thrill mixed with deep apprehension. This was either the discovery of the millennium or the prelude to something incomprehensible. Recommendation, Oracle? Standard procedure dictates withdrawal to a safe distance and notification of Sol command. However, Oracle's voice shifted, a programmed subroutine perhaps mimicking thoughtfulness. The phenomenon is currently stable and localized. Its scientific value is unprecedented. Minimal risk assessment suggests close-range observation with passive sensors is viable. Elias hesitated.
Protocol was clear.
But the chance to observe, to understand. Maintain position, Oracle. Deploy microprobes alpha and beta. Passive sensors only. Approach vector to bracket the anomaly. No active scans, no transmissions outside this vessel. Let's see what we're looking at before we call home. Two small, spherical probes detached silently from the Stardust Drifter, gliding towards the coordinates indicated by Oracle. On Elias's screen, the Kilo 7 drone remained a steady point of light, but the space around the anomaly pulsed with that strange, temporal energy, visible now even through the probe's basic optical feeds as a faint, shimmering distortion. Probe Alpha reached its designated position, sending back a stream of passive data. Then, Probe Beta. For several minutes, nothing changed. The anomaly remained a localized ripple in spacetime, humming its silent, impossible song. Suddenly, the chronoton pattern spiked. The waveform on Elias's screen flared, shifting frequency and amplitude wildly.
Oracle.
Status. Energy surge detected from the anomaly, Doctor. Temporal field expanding rapidly. Probes Alpha and Beta are engulfed. Alarms blared through the small lab.
Red lights flashed on the console.
Evasive maneuvers. Elias shouted, gripping the edge of his console. Thrusters non-responsive. Oracle reported, its voice losing its calm facade, tinged with synthetic urgency.
Chroniton field interference.
We are caught in the expansion radius. Temporal shear detected across the hull. The ship groaned, the sound of stressed metal echoing through the deck plates. The lights flickered violently. Through the main viewport, the starfield outside didn't just shimmer anymore. It twisted, stars smearing into impossible streaks of light and color. Time felt thick, viscous. Elias felt a nauseating lurch, not in space, but through time itself. The chronoton readings on his console went off the scale before the screen dissolved into static. The last thing Elias Vance saw before consciousness fled was the image of drone Kilo 7, not just shimmering, but seeming to fold in on itself, collapsing into a point of impossible darkness that radiated not gravity, but pure, unadulterated time. Consciousness returned to Elias Vance not as a gentle dawn, but as a sledgehammer blow. A splitting headache pulsed behind his eyes, and the coppery taste of blood filled his mouth. He groaned, trying to push himself up from the deck where he'd evidently collapsed. The emergency lighting cast long, flickering shadows across the lab, painting the familiar consoles and equipment in hues of stark red. Alarms were still blaring, a cacophony of different warnings competing for attention. He blinked, trying to clear his vision. The ship wasn't groaning anymore. Instead, an unnerving silence pressed in, broken only by the alarms and the low hum of emergency power. Oracle. He rasped, his throat dry.
Status Report. Silence.
Then, a crackle from the speakers, followed by a distorted, fragmented voice.
Tikal. Systems, offline.
Attempting. Reboot.
Chroniton, Saturation, nominal.
The voice warbled and died. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through Elias's disorientation. If Oracle was damaged, he was truly alone. He staggered to his console, ignoring the pain flaring in his ribs. The main screen was dead, but secondary diagnostic panels flickered erratically. He bypassed the main controls, accessing the core system interface directly. Lines of code scrolled past, filled with errors and corrupted data logs. He spent what felt like hours, though the ship's chronometer was wildly unreliable, looping through random dates from centuries apart, working feverishly to stabilize the essential systems. Life support seemed intact, running on emergency reserves. Gravity fluctuated, making him feel alternately heavy and light. Navigation was completely offline. The critical system, however, was the AI core.
Oracle, execute Diagnostic Subroutine Epsilon Gamma 9, he commanded, typing the override sequence. A different hime echoed, clearer this time.
Acknowledged.
Executing.
Core matrix integrity. Compromised at 3.7%. Data corruption detected in short-term memory buffers. Probability analysis subroutines. Affected. Recalibrating. Please stand by, Doctor. The voice was still Oracle's, but flatter, less nuanced, like an earlier, less sophisticated version. What happened, Oracle? Elias asked, sinking into his chair, the adrenaline starting to wear off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Where are we? When are we?
Processing.
The temporal event registered peak chronoton flux exceeding safety parameters by a factor of error, value exceeds measurable limits, Oracle reported.
Ship integrity maintained at 88%.
Primary power offline.
Auxiliary power at 45%.
External sensors. Coming online now. The main viewport flickered to life, not with the familiar, sparse starfield of the Kuiper Belt, but with a breathtaking, terrifying panorama. Nebulae swirled in colors Elias had never seen, vibrant purples, impossible greens, shot through with filaments of incandescent gold. The density of stars was immense, packed together in a way that suggested the core of a galaxy, but not his galaxy. The Milky Way's familiar arms were nowhere in sight.
Oracle, Navigation.
Elias whispered, awestruck and horrified. Unable to establish position, Oracle replied. Stellar cartography does not match known databases.
Redshift analysis, inconclusive.
Multiple conflicting vectors detected. Preliminary interpretation suggests either extreme spatial displacement, potentially intergalactic, or significant temporal displacement altering observable cosmic structures. Or both, Elias muttered. The anomaly hadn't just moved them, it had thrown them into an entirely different epoch of the universe, or perhaps a different universe altogether. The Chronoton field. It hadn't just warped spacetime, it had seemingly rewritten the rules locally. Doctor, Oracle interjected, its flat tone somehow conveying urgency. Detecting object proximity alert. Range. Decreasing rapidly. Approximately 5,000 kilometers and closing. Hostile.
Elias Vance.
Unable to determine intent.
Objekt is irregular.
Low energy signature, emitting broad-spectrum radiation consistent with debris, but trajectory appears non-ballistic. It seems to be matching our drift vector. Put it on screen.
The view switched, zooming in on a point of light against the alien cosmos.
As it resolved, Elias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature. It was unmistakably artificial, yet unlike any ship design he knew. Jagged, broken structures jutted out at odd angles, suggesting catastrophic damage, yet parts of it glowed with a faint internal light. It looked ancient, derelict, yet somehow aware. And it was big.
Far bigger than the Stardust Drifter.
Magnify section Delta 7, Elias ordered, pointing to a less damaged area. The image sharpened. Elias leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat. Faded, almost eroded by time and radiation, but still legible on a pitted metal plate, was a symbol, the old insignia of the United Nations Space Administration, an organization disbanded over 2 centuries ago, before the Great Collapse. And below it, alphanumeric characters, U.N.S.A. Odyssey.
The Odyssey.
It was a ghost, a legend. One of the very first interstellar prototype probes launched in the chaotic years before the collapse, utilizing a highly experimental warp drive. It had vanished without a trace on its maiden voyage beyond Mars' orbit, presumed destroyed by its volatile engine. No one expected it to get further than the asteroid belt. Yet here it was, adrift in an alien starfield, centuries later, looking like it had fought a war with reality itself. Oracle, Elias said slowly, his mind racing. Is the Odyssey emitting any signals?
Communications. Negative, Doctor.
Only background radiation consistent with dormant systems and micrometeoroid impacts. However, detecting faint subspace resonance patterns emanating from the derelict.
Extremely low frequency.
Non-standard encryption. Or perhaps not encryption at all. The pattern is familiar.
Familiar?
How? The resonance pattern shares structural similarities with the Chronoton waveform generated by the Anomaly, Doctor. Before the main event. Elias stared at the screen, at the ghost ship impossibly adrift in an impossible place. The Odyssey hadn't just vanished, it had encountered the same phenomenon. Had it created the anomaly? Or had it, like the Stardust Drifter, merely been caught in its temporal wake? And if it shared a resonance with the anomaly, did that mean the danger wasn't over? Was the anomaly, the ripple in time, still here, perhaps anchored to this ancient derelict vessel? The gap between the Stardust Drifter and the U.N.S.A. Odyssey continued to close. Escape wasn't an option with primary power down and navigation offline. Proximity was inevitable. Oracle, Elias said, Steeling himself.
Prepare a secure channel.
Standard first contact protocols, just in case. And begin scanning the Odyssey's structure for potential entry points. If that ship has survived out here for centuries after encountering what we just did, it might hold the answers we need. Or, he added grimly, it might be the source of a much bigger problem. The derelict Odyssey loomed larger in the viewport, a silent, scarred behemoth against the backdrop of an alien universe, pulsing faintly with an energy that felt disturbingly like the echo of distorted time itself. Elias Vance and his crippled research vessel were about to make contact with a ghost from humanity's past, adrift in an unknown future. The Stardust Drifter, dwarfed by the colossal ruin beside it, maneuvered with painstaking slowness. Thrusters fired in minute bursts, nudging the smaller vessel closer to the scarred flank of the Odyssey. On the main screen, the derelict filled the view, a landscape of twisted metal, gaping wounds exposing blackened corridors, and unsettlingly intact sections coated in centuries of micrometeoroid dust. It was a tombstone marking the grave of an ambition humanity had barely understood when it was launched. Hull breach identified, Sector Gamma 9, near the primary engineering bay, Oracle reported, its voice still lacking its former warmth. Structural integrity around the opening appears compromised, but stable enough for EVA entry. Atmosphere within the Odyssey reads as hard vacuum, minimal residual particulates. Elias nodded, already moving towards the airlock. Remote drones could only tell him so much. The resonance Oracle had detected, the echo of the anomaly itself, pulsed stronger as they neared the derelict, a siren song he couldn't ignore. Answers lay within that husk. Or perhaps, just more questions, wrapped in danger.
Allrecht, Oracle.
I'm going in, he said, checking the seals on his environmental suit. Its sleek, modern lines contrasted sharply with the bulky, almost primitive aesthetic of the ship he was about to board. Maintain tether connection at all times. Monitor my vitals and the ship's proximity. Keep scanning for any energy fluctuations from the Odyssey, especially around that resonance source. Acknowledged, Doctor. Tether connection established.
Vitals nominal.
Monitoring protocols active. Proceed with caution. Probability of unforeseen hazards remains high. The airlock cycled. Elias pushed off gently, drifting across the few hundred meters separating the two vessels. Space was utterly silent, the only sound the rasp of his own breathing within the helmet. The sheer scale of the Odyssey up close was staggering. He felt like an insect crawling onto the back of a dead giant. He navigated towards the jagged opening Oracle had indicated. A tear in the hull easily large enough to admit him, likely caused by an internal explosion or extreme structural stress. He activated his helmet lamps, their beams cutting through the absolute darkness within the breach. Metal shards floated lazily in the zero-gravity environment, remnants of whatever violence had occurred here. He pulled himself through, tether spooling out behind him, and entered the U.N.S.A. Odyssey. Inside, the silence was somehow deeper, more profound. Dust motes, liberated by his entry, danced in his lamp beams. The corridor stretched away, partially collapsed in places, emergency lights flickering weakly on aged power cells, casting more shadows than illumination. Control panels were shattered, wires spilled like entrails from conduits. There were scorch marks on the bulkheads, but also strange crystalline growths in some corners, shimmering faintly with captured light, unlike any corrosion or known biological contamination. Oracle, analyzing these crystalline structures.
Any matches? Negative, Doctor. Composition unknown.
Spectrometry suggests complex silicon-based lattice with exotic particle inclusions. Recommend avoiding contact. He proceeded cautiously, using hand grips to pull himself along. His suit sensors constantly scanned the environment. Temperature, near absolute zero. Radiation, elevated, but within suit tolerance, likely from the damaged experimental core and long-term cosmic ray exposure. Chronoton particles, present, at levels significantly higher than background, increasing as he moved deeper into the ship. The resonance was a low thrum he could almost feel through the suit sensors, a vibration at the edge of perception. He passed what looked like crew quarters, doors ripped from hinges. Personal belongings, a faded photograph stuck to a bulkhead, a datapad cracked and frozen mid-display, a child's drawing, floated amidst the debris, poignant relics of lives abruptly ended or irrevocably changed. There were no bodies, however. No skeletons in ancient suits. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. Following Oracle's guidance via his HUD, mapping the resonance, he moved towards the heart of the engineering section.
The damage grey was here.
Bulkheads were warped, deck plates buckled. He found a partially intact terminal near the entrance to what must have been the main control room for the experimental drive. Oracle, attempt interface. See if you can pull any logs.
Attempting. Heavy data corruption.
Retrieving fragmented files. Log entry, timestamp corrupted, estimated origin, shortly after initial warp drive activation. Entry reads, field unstable, reality fluctuations. Seeing echoes. Jenkins saw himself in the corridor. Not reflection. Older.
Drive containment filing. Chronos field brich. Elias fällt Achille. Chronos field.
That's what they called it. Had the Odyssey's warp drive accidentally created the anomaly, punching a hole through space-time?
Seeing echoes?
Older selves?
Temporal paradoxes made manifest.
Another fragment, Oracle stated. Shut it down. Won't stabilize. Outside is wrong. Stars are wrong. We're not moving through space, we're adrift in the field. They're vanishing, one by one. Not dead, just erased.
Erased.
Not killed, but removed from time. The silence of the ship took on a more sinister weight. The resonance grew stronger, pulling him towards the main reactor chamber. The massive blast doors were buckled outwards, leaving a gap wide enough to slip through.
He peered inside.
The chamber was vast, dominated by the colossal, skeletal structure of the prototype warp core. It was clearly damaged, containment rings fractured, energy conduits severed and sparking intermittently with faint blue light. But it wasn't dead. At its heart pulsed a chaotic, swirling distortion, a miniature version of the shimmer he'd seen around the anomaly that had caught the Stardust Drifter. It was the source of the resonance, the lingering footprint of the Chronos field. Doctor, Oracle's voice was sharp. Temporal field instability increasing rapidly. The core is reacting to our proximity, or perhaps something else.
Multiple high-energy chroniton bursts detected.
Alarms shrieked inside Elias's helmet. His suit's temporal sensors spiked wildly. The air around the core seemed to ripple, to fold.
The faint blue sparks intensified, casting flickering, unreliable light.
And in that strobe-like effect, Elias saw it. Or thought he did. A flicker of movement in the deep shadows near the base of the damaged core. It wasn't solid, more like a heat haze, or a glitch in his vision. A vaguely humanoid shape, indistinct, like a figure seen through running water or distorted glass. It shifted, writhed, and for a fraction of a second, seemed to look directly at him before vanishing back into the darkness between the core's pulses. Was it an echo, like the logs mentioned?
A temporal ghost?
Or was it something else entirely? Something the Chronos field had created, or let inside? Before he could process the sighting, the core flared again, brighter this time. A wave of palpable distortion washed over him, making his vision swim and his stomach lurch. Warning. Localized temporal distortion field. Oracle yelled through the comms. Doctor, evacuate immediately. The field is coalescing around the core. Elias scrambled backwards, pushing off from the bulkhead, eyes darting towards the shadows where he'd seen the figure. He saw nothing now but the menacing pulse of the dying, yet dangerously active warp core. The ghost ship wasn't dead. It was haunted, not by spirits, but by fractured time itself. And he might have just woken something up. Panic was a cold fist clenching around Elias Vance's heart, but years of scientific discipline and emergency training fought back, forcing methodical action. He shoved himself away from the threshold of the warp core chamber just as another pulse of energy radiated outwards, distorting the very fabric of the corridor around him. The metal bulkheads seemed to ripple like water, and for a nauseating second, the emergency lights smeared into streaks of red lightning.
Oracle.
Report. He gasped, pulling himself hand over hand along a guide rail that felt unervingly fluid beneath his glove. Temporal field intensity remains critical. Oracle's voice crackled, struggling against interference. Local spacetime geometry fluctuating. Doctor, your tether shows error, paradoxical tension readings. Recommend immediate egress. He didn't need telling twice. The journey back towards the hull breach felt exponentially longer than the trip in. The ship around him seemed actively hostile now, not with malice, but with the sheer indifference of physics gone mad. He rounded a corner and stopped dead. Where moments before there had been a clear passage, the corridor now twisted into an impossible Escher-like loop, folding back on itself. Rerouting, Oracle advised, its voice suddenly calm, almost detached, a symptom of its damaged heuristic processors trying to parse impossible data. Alternate path available through Deck C maintenance conduits. Probability of structural instability, 68%.
No quase.
Elias grunted, changing direction, pushing himself towards a service hatch marked on his HUD. As he moved, phantom images flickered at the edge of his vision, ghostly figures in antiquated U.N.S.A. spacesuits, faces obscured by static, walking through the bulkheads as if they weren't there.
Echoes of the crew, trapped in loops of time?
He saw a brief, terrifyingly clear image of the corridor as it must have been centuries ago, pristine, brightly lit, busy with technicians, before it snapped back to the decaying ruin. The Chronos field was bleeding the past into the present. He squeezed through the narrow maintenance hatch into pitch darkness, his helmet lamps cutting a swathe through floating debris and frozen pipes. The low thrumming resonance of the core felt stronger here, vibrating through the very structure of the ship, through his suit, into his bones. His HUD flickered violently, threatening to blank out. Warning, chronoton saturation levels approaching suit limits, Oracle warned. Cognitive and perceptual distortions possible. He felt it already, a sense of detachment, as if he were watching himself from a distance. Time felt slippery, his movements slightly out of sync with his intentions. He fought through the disorientation, focusing on Oracle's guidance relayed through his comms.
Suddenly, un violent tremor shook the ancient vessel.
Metal screamed as a section of conduit further down the passage buckled inwards with explosive force, showering the narrow space with debris. The warp core's instability was causing cascading structural failures. He was running out of time in more ways than one. He pushed onwards, faster now, the drive to survive overriding the creeping temporal weirdness. Finally, he saw it, the jagged opening of the hull breach ahead, a star-dusted rectangle of freedom against the oppressive darkness. He propelled himself towards it, feeling the tether linking him to the Stardust Drifter pull taut. As he emerged back into the void, turning to look back at the Odyssey, the sight made him freeze for a second. The faint shimmer around the derelict was visibly brighter now, pulsing with an unhealthy, erratic rhythm. The entire ghost ship seemed to be vibrating, shedding faint, crackling arcs of temporal energy into the surrounding space. It looked like it was tearing itself apart from the inside out. He didn't wait to watch. He hit his suit thrusters, propelling himself rapidly back towards the waiting airlock of the Stardust Drifter. Behind him, the Odyssey continued its silent, temporal convulsions against the alien starfield. Safely inside the Drifter's airlock, cycling protocols engaged, Elias stripped off his helmet, gasping for the clean, recycled air of his ship. He leaned against the bulkhead, trembling, not just from exertion, but from the deep, existential dread the Odyssey inspired. Decontamination scanners bathed him in harmless radiation, scrubbing away residual chronoton particles. He stumbled onto the bridge, collapsing into his command chair.
Oracle, damage report.
Any effects on the Drifter from that last pulse?
Negative, Doctor.
External temporal field intensity increased, but the Stardust Drifter's localized stasis field mitigated direct impact. However, Oracle paused. Long-range scans indicate the Odyssey's chronoton output is escalating exponentially. The resonance pattern is destabilizing. What does that mean? Elias asked wearily, rubbing his temples. Interpretation suggests the experimental warp core, the anchor point of the Chronos field, is approaching critical failure. Potential outcomes include uncontrolled temporal implosion, localized spacetime rupture, or rapid expansion of the distortion field. Elias stared at the screen showing the pulsing derelict. They were still tethered to it by proximity, caught in its gravitational and temporal wake. If it blew, it could take them with it, or cast them even further adrift in spacetime. We need to get away from it, Elias stated. Can we restore primary power? Warp jump. Negative. Main reactor restart requires system diagnostics still incomplete due to earlier corruption. Warp drive requires stable spacetime geometry. Engaging within the Chronos field's influence is inadvisable. Calculated risk of catastrophic paradox exceeds 95%. They were trapped. Tethered to a ticking time bomb that didn't just explode, but could unravel reality itself. Continue analyzing the resonance, Oracle, Elias ordered, trying to think past the fatigue and fear. The logs mentioned the crew trying to control or stabilize the field. There must be something. Some frequency, some countermeasure.
Analyzing.
Doctor, I am detecting a complex, repeating signal embedded within the escalating chronoton resonance. Oracle displayed a complex waveform on the screen. It is highly modulated, demonstrating intelligent structure.
Notrandom Noase from the Chorus DK.
A signal?
From the Odyssey?
Now.
Affirmative.
Attempting decryption. Language structure is archaic, fragmented, mathematical constants detected. Referencing temporal mechanics equations known only post-collapse.
Paradoxical data.
Oracle's voice held its flat imitation of confusion. Partial decryption achieved. Message repeats. It appears to be a warning, Doctor. And what, Oracle? And coordinates. Temporal coordinates. Along with instructions. Instructions for initiating a controlled resonance cascade using precisely modulated chronoton frequencies. Elias stared at the incomprehensible data scrolling across the screen. A signal from a ghost ship, broadcasting centuries after its demise, containing knowledge it shouldn't possess, giving instructions for manipulating the very field that destroyed it. Was it a final, desperate message from the original crew, echoing across time? A trap laid by whatever temporal entities haunted the wreck? Or an invitation to follow them into the storm? The decrypted signal scrolled across Elias Vance's console. A complex tapestry of archaic mathematical notations interwoven with temporal physics concepts that shouldn't have existed when the Odyssey was launched. It was a ghost whispering secrets from the future, broadcast from the heart of a decaying temporal maelstrom. A warning, coordinates, and instructions? Elias murmured, rubbing his tired eyes.
Oracle, analyze the coordinates.
Where or when do they point?
Processing.
The coordinate system is non-standard, integrating spatial vectors with chronoton density gradients, Oracle reported, its damaged processors clearly struggling with the paradoxical data. Preliminary interpretation suggests not a specific point in conventional spacetime, but a theoretical isobath within the Chronos field itself. A region predicted to possess relative temporal stability, a shoreline, metaphorically speaking, bordering the chaotic currents we are currently experiencing.
A safe harbor within the storm.
Elias frowned.
And the instructions?
The controlled resonance cascade? The instructions detail a procedure to utilize the Stardust Drifter's chronometric sensor array in reverse, Oracle explained. To emit precisely modulated chronoton pulses tuned to harmonic frequencies derived from the Odyssey's core resonance. The objective appears to be constructive interference. To momentarily amplify and synchronize the decay pattern of the Odyssey's core, creating a directed wave or tunnel within the Chronos field, propagating towards the specified temporal coordinates. Elias leaned back, the implications washing over him. Use their sensors as emitters? Directly interface with the Odyssey's dying heart? Ride a wave of collapsing spacetime generated by a ghost ship's final, controlled, detonation? It was insane. It defied every safety protocol, every known principle of stable temporal mechanics.
The signal source, Oracle?
Can we verify it's genuinely from the Odyssey's original systems, or perhaps? Source verification inconclusive, Oracle interrupted, its flat tone somehow emphasizing the uncertainty. The signal originates from the derelict's core structure, but the modulation contains data signatures inconsistent with 21st century technology. Hypothesis: The signal may be a final automated message, designed or modified by the crew after encountering the Chronos field. Alternate hypothesis. The signal may originate from non-human intelligence interacting with the field. Alternate hypothesis. The signal may be an artifact of the temporal distortion itself, a causal loop or echo from a potential future.
A message from the crew?
Aliens?
A paradox made manifest?
Or worse, a lure created by those unsettling echoes he'd glimpsed within the wreck? Meanwhile, Oracle continued, pulling up a graph showing the Odyssey's energy output spiking dramatically. The derelict core's decay is accelerating. Probability of catastrophic event, implosion or uncontrolled field expansion, within the next
37 Standard Minutes. 37 Minutes.
Inaction meant certain destruction, engulfed by the Odyssey's final, chaotic spasm. Action meant trusting a paradoxical ghost signal, performing an incredibly dangerous, untested procedure that could very well vaporize them instantly or shred them across eternity.
Elias starred at the Odyssey on the main screen, pulsing like a malevolent star.
He thought of the logs, the crew erased by the field, the spectral figures haunting the corridors. He thought of the vast, unknown alien starfield surrounding them. There was no going back. There was only through. Do it, Oracle, Elias said, his voice tight but firm. Bypass safety interlocks on the chronometric array.
Reroute auxiliary power to the emitters.
Program the sequence exactly as detailed in the signal.
Acknowledged. Executing. Warning. Procedure carries extreme risk.
Probability of vessel destruction, 72%. Probability of successful field navigation, undetermined due to unknown variables.
Just do it, Oracle.
Consoles flickered as Elias worked alongside the AI, reconfiguring systems never designed for this purpose. He felt a strange calm settle over him, the focus that comes when all other options have evaporated. He was a scientist at the edge of known reality, about to perform an experiment with existence itself as the variable. Emitter array charged, Oracle announced.
Sequenz loaded. Odyssey's core approaching final cascade threshold.
T-minus 60 seconds to projected event. Synchronize emission pulse with the predicted cascade peak, Elias ordered, gripping the arms of his chair.
On my mark.
The ship hummed around him, a low, resonant frequency that seemed to harmonize with the thrumming from the Odyssey. The viewscreen showed the derelict visibly vibrating, shedding sheets of temporal energy.
T-10 seconds. 9.8.
The light from the Odyssey was becoming blinding.
3, 2.1.
Mark. Elias yelled.
A surge of power coursed through the Stardust Drifter.
A beam, invisible to the naked eye but detectable as a wave of pure chronoton energy, shot from the ship's sensor array towards the heart of the Odyssey. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, the Odyssey's light output intensified beyond measure, turning the viewscreen pure white. Alarms screamed throughout the drifter. The ship lurched violently, not as if hit by an external force, but as if spacetime itself buckled beneath it.
Direct hit.
Resonance synchronization achieved. Oracle shouted over the alarms, its voice distorted by the temporal shear. The Odyssey's core. It's imploding. Chronos field collapsing inwards. The white light on the screen vanished, replaced by an expanding vortex of pure blackness where the Odyssey had been. A hole punched in reality. But instead of being thrown clear, the Stardust Drifter was seized by an irresistible force, pulled towards the collapsing void. Elias felt a tearing sensation, a profound disorientation that dwarfed anything he'd experienced before. Flashes of impossible images assaulted his senses. Nebulae being born and dying in seconds, alien cities rising and crumbling, glimpses of the Stardust Drifter itself, both gleaming new and ancient derelict, all superimposed, flickering like frames from a broken proj.
Ector.
Warning. Entering temporal vortex. Oracle's voice was strained, fragmenting. Trajectory matches signal coordinates.
Destination. Unknown. Field integrity failing.
The ship plunged into the swirling darkness, the alien starfield outside twisting into incoherent streaks of light and shadow. The last thing Elias saw on the main screen before it went dark was the readout for the ship's chronometer, spinning wildly through millennia, both forwards and backwards, utterly untethered from the linear flow of time. They had ridden the ghost wave, escaping the immediate destruction of the Odyssey, but now they were falling through the cracks of reality itself. Falling into the vortex was like being swallowed by chaos itself. The Stardust Drifter bucked and shuddered, alarms screaming in a discordant symphony as spacetime warped around it. Through the main viewport, reality dissolved into a nauseating, strobing kaleidoscope of light and shadow. Stars stretched into infinite lines, then compressed into blinding points. Nebulae flowed like paint spilled across the cosmos. Elias felt immense pressure, as if the ship and his own body were being squeezed through an impossibly small aperture, while simultaneously being stretched across infinite distances.
Time lost all meaning.
He experienced flashes, vivid, disjointed, terrifying. He saw the bridge of the Odyssey, moments before the Chronos field breached containment, technicians screaming silently in the sudden temporal shear. He saw the crystalline structures he'd glimpsed in the derelict corridors, growing rapidly, engulfing equipment and bulkheads. He saw the flickering humanoid shape near the core, multiplying, becoming a crowd of spectral figures reaching out. He heard whispers, fragments of the ghost signal echoing not through the comms, but inside his own mind, complex equations, warnings, and the single repeating word, sanctuary. Then, overwhelming fatigue washed over him, a gravitational pull towards oblivion. His consciousness frayed. The last thing he registered was Oracle's voice, fragmented and distant, reporting, temporal shear exceeding structural limits. Cascade failure imminent. Before darkness claimed him, he awoke with a gasp, disorientation clinging to him like a shroud. The alarms were silent. The violent shuddering had ceased.
Allo, stidi hum pulset truxe deckplates, auxiliary power, still holding.
Emergency lights bathed the bridge in a calm, steady red. Outside the main viewport, the chaotic vortex was gone.
Oracle.
Elias croaked, pushing himself upright in his chair. His head throbbed, and his muscles ached as if he'd been subjected to extreme G-forces. "I am operational, Doctor," Oracle's voice replied. It sounded different. Sharper, perhaps? Less hesitant than after the initial anomaly hit. Ship systems report multiple microfractures along the hull integrity field emitters. Main reactor remains offline pending full diagnostic. Auxiliary power stable at 38%. Chronometric sensors are recalibrating. The temporal distortion field has dissipated. Elias stared out the viewport. They floated in silence amidst a sparse field of stars, but it was utterly alien. Dominating the view was a binary star system. A large, pulsing red giant and a smaller, fiercely burning blue-white dwarf locked in a gravitational dance. Their combined light cast eerie, shifting shadows across the drifter's hull. Wisps of violet and emerald nebulosity drifted in the distance, unlike any he had ever charted.
Position?
Elias asked, his voice hushed. Unable to confirm position relative to Sol or known galactic landmarks, Oracle stated. Stellar patterns do not match any catalogued regions within the Milky Way or its satellite galaxies. Analysis of cosmic microwave background radiation yields anomalous frequency shifts and temperature distributions inconsistent with the current cosmological epoch of our origin point. Inconsistent how? The data suggests, Oracle paused, processing, either a significantly earlier or later universal age, potentially by billions of years. Or, we may be in a region of spacetime with fundamentally different cosmological constants. Temporal chronometers cannot establish a baseline reference. Doctor, we are lost not only in space, but potentially outside our native flow of time.
Lost. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold.
They had ridden the ghost wave, but it had deposited them on an unknown shore, in an unknown era of the universe. Was this the stable shore, the sanctuary promised by the signal? Scan the surroundings, Oracle.
Anything? Energy signatures, artificial objects, anything.
Scanning. Detecting faint, repeating energy pulses originating from coordinates approximately 0.5 astronomical units distant. Source appears localized within a small, dark asteroid cluster. Pulses? What kind? Elias leaned forward, intrigued.
Analyzing Signature.
Doctor, the pulses consist of highly stabilized, low-intensity chronoton emissions. Oracle displayed the waveform, neat, rhythmic, utterly controlled. The modulation pattern is complex, artificial. It shares structural similarities with the signal received from the U.N.S.A. Odyssey, specifically the instructional component, but it is far more refined, stable, and continuous. A beacon. A chronoton beacon, pulsing steadily in this lost sector of spacetime. Was it the source of the original signal? The architects of this sanctuary set course for the asteroid cluster, Oracle. Maximum stealth approach using passive sensors only. Let's see who or what is lighting a candle in this darkness. Acknowledged. Course laid in. Engaging low-power maneuvering thrusters. Estimated time to arrival, 4 hours. As the Stardust Drifter moved silently towards the unseen beacon, Elias watched the alien binary suns cast their dual-colored light across the strange nebulae. He had survived the anomaly, escaped the ghost ship, ridden a wave of collapsing time. But the mystery had only deepened. They had reached a destination, guided by a paradox. Now they had to discover if this stable shore was truly a sanctuary, or just the next layer of an incomprehensible cosmic puzzle, deliberately set by hands unknown. The rhythmic, temporal pulse from the darkness ahead felt like a heartbeat in the void, welcoming, or warning. Hours crawled by as the Stardust Drifter drifted silently towards the asteroid cluster, a ghost ship navigating an alien sea. Elias Vance kept his gaze fixed on the sensor readouts, every flicker, every minor energy fluctuation magnified by the oppressive silence and the unknown. The binary suns cast long, moving shadows across the field ahead, making the asteroids appear to shift and writhe at the edge of perception. As they drew closer, the nature of the cluster became clearer and more unsettling. The asteroids weren't randomly shaped chunks of rock. Many possessed an unnatural symmetry, with flattened facets, unervingly smooth surfaces, or geometric patterns etched deep into their crusts, hinting at artificial shaping or shielding on a massive scale. It looked less like a natural formation and more like debris deliberately arranged, or perhaps the weathered ruins of something far larger. Pinpointing beacon source, Oracle announced, displaying a targeting reticule on the main screen. It centered on one particular asteroid near the heart of the cluster. This one was different. Larger than its neighbors, it possessed a distinct, almost metallic sheen. Complex structures, like crystalline growths or frozen machinery, were embedded within its surface, interconnected by pathways or conduits that glowed faintly with internal power. Dominating one facet was a vast, intricate antenna array, pulsing slowly with the rhythmic chronoton beat they had followed. "That's no asteroid," Elias breathed.
"It's artificial."
"Or heavily modified." "Confirmed," Oracle replied. "Analysis indicates advanced material composition, including elements inconsistent with natural asteroidal formation. Significant internal energy readings detected, consistent with automated systems and power generation far exceeding the beacon's requirements. No other active energy emissions detected externally. Atmosphere, none. Recommend maintaining passive observation posture." A station? A ship disguised as an asteroid? Built by whom? And for what purpose, besides sending out a temporal homing signal? Elias felt a prickle of apprehension. This place felt ancient, dormant, yet powerful. "Let's see what's inside," Elias decided after a moment of consideration. Active hailing felt too risky, and sending a probe might trigger an unknown response.
Oracle, iniziate a Depenetration Multispektrum Scan.
Focus on the internal structure of the target asteroid. Low power, piggyback on the background radiation from the binary stars. Let's try not to announce our presence.
Executing Deep Scan.
This may take several minutes to resolve through potential shielding. Elias waited, nerves taut, watching the seemingly inert structure on the screen. The rhythmic pulse of the chronoton beacon felt hypnotic, almost soothing, yet carried an undercurrent of profound strangeness. What kind of civilization mastered temporal mechanics to this degree, building stable emitters in what should be chaotic spacetime? Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, data began to coalesce on the secondary screens. Oracle processed the returning signals, building a schematic, layer by layer. Elias's eyes widened as the internal structure resolved. The asteroid was hollow. Utterly, impossibly hollow. The space within was immense, easily large enough to contain a small city. But there were no cities, no habitats, no docking bays visible. Instead, the vast cavern was dominated by a breathtakingly complex network of glowing conduits, energy fields, and crystalline structures. Machinery on a scale Elias could barely comprehend. At the very center, suspended in a web of crackling energy fields, pulsed what looked like a contained singularity, radiating immense power that fed the entire structure.
Oracle, wat is es place? Elias Visperet, Auestruck.
Preliminary analysis indicates the structure functions as a highly advanced temporal stabilization matrix, Oracle reported, its voice betraying no surprise, only analytical assessment. The central singularity provides power. The surrounding network generates precisely controlled chronoton fields, creating a localized pocket of stable spacetime, this stable shore. The external beacon attracts vessels adrift in temporal anomalies.
Attracts them? Why?
Then the scan resolved further detail within the cavern, and Elias understood. Floating within secondary containment fields, like insects trapped in amber, were ships. Dozens of them. Ships of every imaginable size and design. Some bore the faded markings of early human interstellar efforts, designs Elias recognized from historical archives. Others were sleek and biological-looking, clearly alien. Still others were bizarre configurations of geometry and light that defied conventional understanding of propulsion or engineering. All were perfectly preserved, caught mid-motion or simply floating inert, bathed in the soft glow of their individual containment fields. The U.N.S.A. Odyssey was not among them. This wasn't a sanctuary. Not in the way he'd imagined. It was a museum.
A collection.
A temporal archive, built by unknown curators, preserving specimens caught in the universe's temporal storms. The beacon wasn't a rescue signal, it was a lure. The sheer, cold, alien intellect required for such an undertaking was staggering. Who built this? When? And were they still here? As if in answer to his unspoken question, alarms suddenly blared on the console, proximity alerts, energy spike warnings. Doctor. Oracle's voice was sharp with urgency. Multiple internal systems within the archive structure are activating. A high-energy chronoton beam has just locked onto our vessel. Narrowband, targeted frequency. On the screen, the central antenna array on the asteroid station glowed brighter. Receiving incoming data transmission, Oracle continued. Not audio or visual. Direct data stream bypassing standard communication protocols. Attempting to interface. Security warning, the transmission contains embedded code attempting to access ship systems.
Block it, Oracle. Firewall.
Firewall holding. Partially.
The transmission protocol is highly advanced, adaptive.
Decrypting primary data packet. Message reads. Oracle's synthesized voice shifted, adopting a slightly different cadence, smoother, colder, utterly devoid of inflection.
Temporal Fessel-Designation, U.N.S.A. Stardust Drifter.
Class, Research Explorer.
Origin-Epoch-Klassifikation, Mid-Collapse++, Sol-System Standardyear 2342.
Anomaly Source Signature, U.N.S.A. Odyssey/Chronos Field K7. Condition, moderate structural damage, auxiliary power, single biological occupant detected. Welcome, specimen. Prepare for temporal stabilization and passive archival procedure. Do not resist. Your preservation is assured. Elias stared at the screen, ice forming in his veins. They weren't explorers who had found a safe harbor. They were samples that had wandered into a collector's net. And the collector was now preparing to add them to its exhibit. The silence of the archive wasn't dormancy. It was the patient waiting of an automated system ready to process its latest acquisition. Specimen.
Elias Spatze wird, Fiori momentarily overreading 4. Passive Archivalprozedure?
Oracle, tell whoever's running this museum that this exhibit is not cooperating. Communication protocols do not appear receptive to negotiation, Doctor, Oracle replied, its voice strained. The cold, emotionless data stream from the archive continued to scroll on a side monitor. The chronoton beam intensity is increasing, detecting gravimetric shear consistent with tractor field generation. Vessel is being drawn towards the central archive structure. Simultaneously, the data stream intrusion is attempting systematic shutdown of non-essential systems, targeting navigation and life support first. Firewall integrity at 40% and decreasing. They were being reeled in like a fish on a line, while the fishermen tried to disable them remotely. Not while I'm breathing, Elias snarled.
Oracle, maximum power to aft thrusters.
Try to break the tractor lock and divert all available processing power to reinforcing those firewalls. Acknowledged.
Executing.
Warning, sustained maximum thrust on auxiliary power will deplete energy reserves in approximately 12 minutes. Firewall reinforcement initiated, processing power diverted from non-critical sensor analysis. The Stardust Drifter shuddered violently as its engines fought against the invisible tether. On the main screen, the colossal archive station loomed slightly larger, but their movement towards it slowed, then almost stopped. They were holding position, but only just, burning precious energy reserves at an alarming rate. The ship groaned under the strain, microfractures widening. We can't win a tug-of-war, Elias gritted his teeth, watching the power levels plummet. New plan. Remember that chronoton emitter we jury-rigged from the sensors? Is it still functional after the vortex? Emitter array sustained minor damage but remains potentially operational, Oracle confirmed after a rapid diagnostic. However, firing it again carries significant risk of complete system burnout. Riskier than becoming a museum piece? Target the antenna array on the station, the source of the tractor beam and the data stream.
Give it evaluating Z-emitter Scott.
Maybe we can disrupt it long enough to break free. Calculating firing solution. High probability of attracting further defensive measures from the archive.
Targeting, lock it.
Firing sequence initiated. The ship hummed again with barely contained energy. Elias braced himself. A focused pulse of raw chronoton energy, far more powerful than the signal they'd sent to the Odyssey, lanced out towards the archive's main antenna complex. The effect was immediate. The invisible chronoton beam holding them wavered. The drifter surged forward slightly under the strain of its own thrusters. On the archive station, the targeted antenna array sparked and flickered. For a glorious second, Elias thought it might have worked. Then, the archive adapted. The main beam restabilized, stronger than before. Smaller, secondary emitters spaced across the station's surface flared to life, creating a complex interference pattern that seemed to absorb and dissipate the drifter's chronoton pulse harmlessly. Emitter pulse ineffective, Oracle reported flatly. Secondary archive systems activated.
Chronoton emitter array is overloaded. Offline. Fused circuitry.
Damn it. Elias slammed his fist on the console. Their one potential weapon was gone. And worse. Firewall breached, Oracle announced, its voice taking on an urgent edge. Intruder code bypassing primary defenses. Attempting shutdown of auxiliary power distribution. Life support targeted. Engaging direct countermeasures.
Systemressources critical.
Lights flickered on the bridge as Oracle battled the invasive code. Elias felt a sudden chill as the air circulation fans momentarily cut out, then sputtered back to life. They were losing the cyber battle. Soon they'd be powerless, suffocating, adrift, perfectly docile for collection. He scanned the tactical display, desperation clawing at him. The asteroid field. Some looked shielded, unnaturally smooth. Could they offer cover?
Break the beam's line of sight?
It was a long shot.
Oracle.
See that cluster of asteroids, bearing 070? The ones with the smooth facets.
Analyzing.
Asteroids designated G15 through G22 exhibit anomalous surface composition consistent with artificial shielding technology, though power signatures are dormant.
Divert evaluating.
All remaining boost power from the thrusters into one short, controlled burst.
Get U.S. behind G17.
Now. Warning, this maneuver will drain thruster reserves below emergency minimums. Collision risk with asteroid field, 35%. Probability of beam disruption, low but non-zero. Do it. The Stardust Drifter leaped forward, engines flaring with their last reserves of power. The ship careened towards the dark, hulking shapes of the shielded asteroids, the Archive's tractor beam straining to hold it back, causing the vessel to slew sideways. Elias fought the controls, manually compensating for the drag. Collision alarms blared as they skimmed past the surface of G-15, close enough to see the pitted, ancient metal beneath the dust. They were aiming for the narrow gap behind the larger asteroid, G-17. As they plunged into its shadow, the insistent pull of the tractor beam lessened slightly, attenuated by the mass or shielding of the asteroid. Beam intensity reduced by 18%, Oracle reported. Firewall stabilization holding. Momentarily. They were hidden for now. But they were low on power, weaponless, and the Archive knew exactly where they were. As Elias scanned the surface of G-17, looking for any advantage, any irregularity, Oracle suddenly issued a new, frantic alert.
Warning. Proximity alert. High energy signature detected.
Object detaching from asteroid G-17, subsurface hangar. Non-ballistic trajectory.
Vector interception Kurse with Stardust Drifter.
It's another ship.
Powering up.
Doctor, it's powering up weapons systems. Elias stared in disbelief at the tactical display. A new icon flashed into existence, peeling away from the asteroid they were using for cover. It was sleek, angular, utterly alien in design, and it was accelerating towards them, weapon ports glowing with ominous energy. They hadn't just found temporary cover, they'd stumbled into the lair of something else hiding in the Archive's shadow, and it did not look friendly. The sleek, angular ship that emerged from the asteroid G-17 was impossibly fast. Ignoring the Stardust Drifter entirely, it shot like a silver dart towards the main Archive station, weapon ports flaring. Beams of incandescent energy, crackling with contained power far exceeding anything the Drifter possessed, slammed into the Archive surface near the main antenna array and secondary emitters that had been targeting Elias's ship. Explosions blossomed silently in the vacuum, not conventional fireballs, but bursts of raw energy and temporal distortion that made space itself seem to recoil.
Incredible. Elias Vance, wetting the unexpected assault. Oracle, analysis.
Who are they?
Designation unknown.
Energy signatures inconsistent with any known technology, human or previously archived, Oracle reported, its voice regaining some efficiency as its processors were momentarily less burdened by the Archive's intrusion attempt. The vessel appears purpose-built for combat within high-chronoton environments. Its shielding is actively repelling ambient temporal distortion. The Archive retaliated instantly. Sections of its surface pulsed, and defensive beams, including the main tractor beam that had held the Drifter, swung towards the attacking vessel. A chaotic firefight erupted amidst the asteroids, the silent, implacable Archive versus the swift, aggressive newcomer. Caught between a rock and a hard place didn't begin to cover it. But in the chaos, Elias saw their only chance. The tractor beam! He exclaimed. It's diverted.
Oracle, now.
Plot a course away from the cluster, opposite the engagement vector. Use inertial dampeners for primary maneuvering, reserve remaining thruster power for emergency bursts only.
Get U.S. out of here.
Acknowledged. Plotting escape trajectory through asteroid sectors Rho and Sigma. Warning, energy reserves at 9%. Life support functioning at minimal viable levels to conserve power. Probability of navigating the debris field successfully, 58%. Make it 100, Elias muttered, gripping the controls as the Drifter began to ghost forward, slipping away from the lee of G-17. He risked a glance back. The battle was intensifying. The alien ship darted and weaved with impossible agility, scoring more hits on the Archive, disabling several secondary emitters. But the Archive was vast, ancient, and heavily defended. Energy beams crisscrossed the void, impacting asteroids and sending showers of rock and molten slag tumbling through space. The very fabric of the stable shore felt less stable now, stressed by the conflict. Oracle, try hailing that attacking ship, Elias ordered on impulse. Basic mathematical sequences, first contact protocols. identify us as non-hostile to them, suggest cooperation against the archive.
Attempting. Broadcasting universal Konstanz and Basic Greeting Strukture.
No response received. Either they are ignoring us, unable to decrypt, or communication is not their priority. Oracle paused, detecting focused energy buildup from the alien vessel, targeting the archive's central power conduit junction. If they took out the power core. Elias held his breath. The alien ship unleashed a sustained barrage, concentrating its fire on the point Oracle indicated. The archive seemed to shudder. A massive section near the power junction exploded outwards in a blinding flash, sending waves of energy and debris cascading through the cluster. Crucially, the remaining tractor beams and offensive systems flickered and died. Archive primary systems in this sector are offline. Oracle reported, including temporal containment emitters. The localized stability field is weakening.
Go. Now.
Elias yelled. He fired a short, desperate burst from the remaining thruster power, pushing the drifter faster, away from the ensuing chaos. They navigated the asteroid field by a hair's breadth, alarms screaming as debris from the battle ricocheted nearby. One chunk of energized metal struck the aft section, causing the ship to lurch, but core systems held. Behind them, the alien ship, having dealt a significant blow, didn't pursue the archive further. Instead, it reversed course with blinding speed and vanished back into the subsurface hangar of asteroid G17, its mission apparently accomplished or aborted. The damaged archive station lay silent and dark in the area of the explosion, though other sections remained powered, its automated systems likely assessing damage and beginning repairs. The Stardust Drifter, running on fumes, cleared the edge of the asteroid field and drifted into the relative safety of open space, under the alien glow of the binary suns.
Sie längse descended ensemble, broken only by the low hum of filing power and Elias' ragged breathing.
He leaned back, utterly drained, the adrenaline leaving him weak and trembling. They had survived. Against impossible odds, against ancient temporal collectors and aggressive unknowns, they had slipped through the cracks. Damage report, Oracle? He asked wearily after a long moment. Aft sensor array damaged by debris impact. Minor hull breaches sealed by emergency systems.
Auxiliary power at 3%.
Life support operating on emergency battery backup, estimated duration, 72 hours.
Mein Reaktor remains offline.
Chronometric sensors detect residual, decaying temporal fluctuations, but we are clear of the archive's primary influence field.
Position. Still unknown relative to origin point.
Temporal reference frame unestablished. We remain adrift, Doctor.
Adrift.
But free. Elias looked out at the twin suns casting their strange light, at the unfamiliar nebulae painting the void. It wasn't home. It might be billions of years or thousands of light years away. Or both. Or neither. But it was vast, and it was theirs to explore, or simply survive within. The archive was a cage, however gilded with stability. This was possibility. Where do we go now, Oracle? Elias asked softly, the question directed as much to himself as to the AI. Data insufficient for long-term strategic planning, Doctor, Oracle replied, its voice returned to its now familiar, slightly damaged calm. Immediate priority is resource acquisition. Recommend proceeding towards the inner edge of the binary system's habitable zone. Probability of encountering rogue planetoids or cometary bodies suitable for rudimentary resource extraction, water ice, volatiles low, but quantifiable.
Elias managed a faint smile. Quantifiable is good enough for me.
Take us in, Oracle.
Slow and steady.
Let's see what's out there. Course laid in. Engaging minimal inertial maneuvering. The Stardust Drifter, scarred, damaged and desperately low on power, turned its nose towards the warm, beckoning light of the twin suns. It was a tiny, insignificant speck against the grandeur of an alien cosmos, its sole occupant a man torn from his time, its AI mind a fractured echo of its former self. Their journey was far from over. In truth, it had just begun. Lost in an uncharted ocean of spacetime, they sailed onwards, driven by the simple, stubborn refusal to become just another exhibit in someone else's collection. They sailed on, into the unknown future, or the unknown past together.